Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And a warning that this show may contain audio images of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have died. This show is dedicated to asylum seekers and refugees, and it is the third show where I will be airing some interviews on some interesting High Court decisions, or an interesting High Court decision that has come through recently about asylum seekers and refugees and detention being unlawful. There have been lots of implications around that. It's a very complex topic. And last Monday we interviewed Max Costello from the Refugee Action Collective, and I'm going to be interviewing him again today because we wanted to have a continuation of that discussion. And I want to welcome Max to the studio.
Thanks, Marissa.
It's so lovely to have you. And then after Max, we will be speaking with Josephine Langbien, who is a senior lawyer from the Human Rights Law Centre, to give us the legal perspective of what is happening with this High Court decision. Max and I will discuss, first of all, the political issues, and there's an article that he's written that he will talk about, and he'll share that title with us pretty soon. And then after that, he will stay for the whole show, and we will hear from Josephine as well. It's approximately 4:02, and over to you, Max.
Thanks, Marissa. I'll just mention something quickly by way of introduction. Marissa was mentioning before we came on air that this is, I think, her first interview since the COVID days. Well, 3.5 years ago, in the depths of COVID, Refugee Action Collective Victoria held a car cavalcade in support of the Medivac men in the Mantra Hotel in Preston. We did that because you couldn't go out and you couldn't visit them, but we thought, and we did, that if we drove around with signs painted on or chalked on or signs held from inside cars, they could see us and know that we hadn't forgotten them and that they were being cared, they were in our thoughts and we supported them. And they were able to gesture back from the windows, and it was they greatly appreciated it. But the police didn't. They issued what people call an on-the-spot fine, a penalty infringement notice on about 30 RAC-Vic members and supporters for breaching, they said, a technical aspect of the COVID restrictions. Some people paid the penalty amount. Some people wanted a day in court and they had that, but they pleaded guilty. But last Wednesday at Heidelberg Magistrates Court, 3.5 years later, the magistrate oversaw the case against the remaining 7. And cut a long story short, the police case was ill-prepared. Yeah. And the police said, we haven't had enough time. And I'm told the magistrate said something like, 3 years, not enough? But I wasn't in the courtroom. I might have been a witness if the case had proceeded. But the next day, Thursday, the police announced that they were dropping all charges.
So they dropped all charges even though Chris Breen from the Refugee Action Collective wasn't even able to get to that protest because they raided his home.
Yes, and again, he escaped a finding of guilt because not because the charges weren't brought, but because of I suppose you could say incompetence on a legal aspect, and so he wasn't. It was case dismissed, I think. So that it's all, in a tiny little victory in one way, but every bit counts. And I was prepared to say, if called as a witness, that we knew from the likes of Moz and others how much they valued just the visual support. It was what kept them going, that someone cared. And that's why...
that was during lockdown.
That was during lockdown. And the sort of reason for going, and we said we were out there under exception number 4, providing care and compassion. So we thought we were legal. And anyway, that's just a quick intro because it's very recent.
Absolutely, and I do remember 2020, I was doing a lot of extensive coverage from home during lockdown and we couldn't go anywhere. We had that 5-kilometre radius as well. And I was doing a lot of interviews not only with Chris Breen but also with lawyers about protest and repression during the COVID. And it was just a crazy time.
Well, another, as you mentioned, Marissa, I wrote a piece in the Australian, it was published a week or so ago in the Australian Independent Media Network.
Yeah.
And when I sent the piece to the editors there, the heading was Labor didn't need to, quote, do a Dutton in response to the High Court decision.
Tell us about the High Court decision and perhaps quote bits out of your article to put it in context. Right.
It was a case that overturned the 20-year-old case of Mr. Al-Khatib. He was a Palestinian, therefore he was stateless, and when you're stateless there's no country to return you to, and they couldn't find any other country to take him. So the High Court was facing indefinite immigration detention. By a narrow majority, 4-3, the High Court held that it was lawful for him to be detained indefinitely. This case, very similar, a stateless person and one who couldn't be returned. They tried 10 different countries, no one would take him. And this time a majority, we haven't got the written decision, but the recently appointed Chief Justice Stephen Gagler, Gagler, he announced that, quote, at least a majority of the judges who'd heard the case agreed that indefinite immigration was unconstitutional. Just quickly on that, that means only the courts can punish people, by, for example, finding them guilty and sentencing them to prison. For years, the High Court had taken the view that immigration detention wasn't punitive, it was only, quote, administrative. But if you're going to spend the rest of your life locked up, that's surely, the pub test, that's clearly punitive, and that's what he announced. But we haven't got the written decision. But nonetheless, the government just had to act promptly and release, I think it was 92 people who were in that situation. They were either stateless or couldn't be returned to any country. See, some countries won't take them back. Iran, for example, will not take people back. And so the Labor government, the case was brought against Minister for Immigration, Andrew Giles, but the Home Affairs Minister, Ms O'Neill, she took a bit of the running in the media commentary and said, yes, we had to release them. Not our decision. We argued against it. Labor was arguing for indefinite immigration detention. Just think on that for a moment. But okay, the High Court decided we have to obey it, and she set about releasing them, or her department did. But it was quickly announced that because some of these people had committed very serious offences, they'd served time in prison, Then they went from prison to immigration detention to await deportation, but they couldn't be deported. They were either stateless or sending them back where they came from would put their lives at risk, or no one had taken them, so they were released. But what Ms O'Neill announced was that via the visa system, the Labor government would impose very, very strict conditions to, quote, protect the Australian community.
So what does that mean, really? I mean, it's not really about protection, is it?
Well, that's what was said. And I wrote this piece because I've been saying this for a while, and so have others, that when a citizen commits a serious offence, it could be rape, it could be murder, it could be whatever, that citizen found guilty, sentenced to prison, once he or she has served the time, he or she is released. Now, there are, with, say, child sex offences in particular, there are controls. They're placed on a sex offenders register. They're not allowed to obviously live or go near, if it's child sex offending, a school or where children are and so on. So the criminal justice system already has, for Australian citizen serious offenders, a set of controls where necessary to protect the community. So that's the first point I make in my article, that since there are controls already on citizen offenders, well, no big deal, all citizen offenders are released, so it should happen the same with non-citizen offenders, and okay, the controls would have to be via a visa condition. That's a technical difference. But look, in principle, it's the same. They've done their time, and as this show has said, I'm doubtless repeatedly, you've done your time, you're out in the community again.
Well, that's right, but not for these asylum seekers. And in fact, I think a couple of weeks ago, and we were starting to talk about this last week on Insiders, they were talking about some of the measures that the Labor government wants to take now to control these non-citizens. Yes.
Now I'll leave. There are conditions. They've set up a new, not a new category of visa, but they've passed. It's gone through the Parliament, and there are now new sections in the Migration Act that create offences for breaching these new conditions, like wearing a monitoring device, otherwise known as an ankle bracelet, reporting to authorities every so often, however not, and others. But I'll leave Josephine to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's because it's getting up to nearly 4:15 now, so I think we should have a couple of announcements, and then perhaps Josephine can come and I can ask her about this stuff. And then if you're happy to stay with me on the show, we can talk about it some more. How does that sound?
That's fine by me.
Okay, we're just going to go into an announcement.
Stand in solidarity with Palestine this Sunday.
With the most devastating attack ever launched on the people of Gaza, it's time for all of us to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Israel has waged war on the Palestinians for the last 75 years. The Nakba, ethnic cleansing, occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza. Israel has now imposed a total blockade on Gaza and declared war, stopping food, electricity and fuel, and launching an all-out attack.
We have to mobilise to show our support for Palestine. 12 p.m, State Library, this Sunday.
Rally to demand freedom and justice for Palestine. No war on Gaza.
Free Palestine Melbourne is a 3CR supporter.
Stand in solidarity with Palestine this Sunday.
Tune in to Health Sovereignty, 3CR's International Day of People with Disability broadcast. On 3rd of December, 7am to 7pm, we're talking about what health, well-being and body sovereignty mean for multiply marginalised disabled people, their kin and communities living on unceded Indigenous lands, with programming by disabled broadcasters from the 3CR and broader community. Visit 3cr.org.au/Disability Day 2023.
And you're back with the Doin Time show, and it's approximately 4:15. And joining us now in the Max Costello from the Refugee Action Collective is in the studio, and you just heard an interview with him, and we're going to be doing some more discussion and analysis later. But joining us as well on the phone is going to be Josephine Langbien, a senior lawyer from the Human Rights Law Centre. We will see if her title has changed. I'll double check that. But yeah, she will be speaking with us about the High Court decision to make indefinite detention unlawful for asylum seekers and refugees, and I will be speaking with her about the legal perspective and some of the implications in terms of the fact that they're not allowed to serve their time. They need to serve more time, and also the fact that they're stateless. Hello, Josephine. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Marissa. Thanks for having me.
It's so lovely to have you. And in fact, listeners may recall that we have interviewed Josephine quite a few times about quite a number of atrocities and violation of human rights that have happened over the years, Josephine.
It's true. It's always a pleasure to join you to discuss these very important issues.
Lovely. Now, I just wanted to let you know also that I also have in the studio Max Costello. I will be conducting the interview, but he will be here with us.
Great. Hi, Max.
Hi, Josephine.
Yeah, so we're going to be speaking about the political stuff again later on. But for now, could you just talk to us a little bit about the work of the Human Rights Law Centre and indeed some of the stuff that's been happening in regards to this High Court decision, Josephine?
Definitely. I mean, it's been a big couple of weeks, Marissa. So the Human Rights Law Centre is a community legal centre that's focused on trying to alleviate injustice and work with communities across Australia to improve our laws and improve equality. One of the matters that we were involved with recently was this High Court case, which you mentioned. The case was brought by a plaintiff who went by the pseudonym NZYQ. And this was a case heard by the High Court a couple of weeks ago that in a really hugely significant decision, the High Court effectively ended the practice of indefinite immigration detention in Australia. So the court overturned a 2-decades-old authority that had previously allowed the government to lock people up in immigration detention for as long as they wanted, potentially for a person's whole life, simply because someone didn't have a visa and couldn't be removed from Australia. But the High Court in this case held that the government can no longer continue to detain a person if there's no real prospect that the government can actually deport that person in the foreseeable future. And so the court decided that ongoing detention in those circumstances is unconstitutional. So this was, as I said, a really hugely significant decision, which has had really profound consequences for a lot of people.
Max and I were just discussing before you came on air prior to, just about how people who are citizens can serve their time and go back into the community. And yet asylum seekers and refugees can't do that. The non-citizens, I should say. And what is that? Can you explain that from a legal perspective and what happens there?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a really crucial difference that you point out. So every day, Australian citizens who have been convicted of a crime and have served their sentence are released back into the community. And that's because our criminal legal system is supposed to allow for this concept of rehabilitation. So most people are allowed to go back to their families and their communities and get on with their lives. Now, people who happen to be migrants and refugees shouldn't be treated any differently, but because we have an incredibly harsh visa cancellation regime in Australia, what tends to happen to people who are visa holders is that if they are sentenced to a term of imprisonment of a particular length, or if that's been combined with a few other factors, the government very often cancels people's visas, and so at the conclusion of their sentence, they are taken from prison into immigration detention. Now, some people are then removed from Australia to their countries of origin, but for people who can't be removed, and so we're talking really about people who are stateless or people who are owed protection obligations, so they have no safe third country to go to, they can't be removed, and so they end up staying in detention, and they end up stuck in detention for years upon years. And up until very recently, the government was perfectly content to allow people to stay there potentially for the rest of their lives. The government had not provided any sort of pathway to freedom or any solution to this situation.
So, I don't understand. I mean, it doesn't make...
It doesn't make any sense.
It actually doesn't make sense. And this is why I invited Max Costello from the Refugee Action Collective to join me in the studio today, why I spoke to him last week, and why I've actually got you on air today. And at the end, getting towards the end of our interview, I'm going to ask Max to comment on what you've said, if that's okay, Josephine.
Of course.
But before we do that, I mean, what does it all mean in practice? I mean, in terms of if they're staying in detention, isn't that unlawful?
Well, it is now, but it wasn't until the High Court's decision a couple of weeks ago.
And now?
And so now we have a situation where it's very clearly unconstitutional for the government to continue to detain someone if there's no realistic chance that the government can actually deport a person. So the High Court's decision unfortunately isn't going to undo this visa cancellation regime that we have. So there are still going to be people who, at the end of their prison sentence, are really unfortunately taken to immigration detention, and some people will continue to be removed from Australia. But the people who are impacted by this court decision are the people who can't be removed from Australia. And so now the High Court has said that people in this situation must be released into the community.
And yet the government is wanting to put in, quote, safeguards, unquote.
That's right. And so last week we saw this incredibly disappointing knee-jerk response from the government, which further punishes these people who have just been released from years and years of indefinite immigration detention. It's a set of laws that were rushed through Parliament to impose some draconian conditions on the visas that people are being issued when they've been released from detention. There's about 10 mandatory conditions that are being applied to people's visas that are being applied regardless of people's personal circumstances or whether they've ever committed an offence or not. And so these conditions involve things like ongoing monitoring, restrictions on people's movement and activities. Some people are going to be subject to nightly curfews and forced to wear ankle bracelets, so to be subject to 24/7 electronic monitoring. And perhaps the most concerning part of all of this is that some of those conditions are now being enforced with the threat of criminal sanctions. So a breach of some of these conditions comes with a mandatory minimum 1-year imprisonment sentence. And so people are at risk of going to prison for something as simple as failing to tell the government about a new housemate that moved in with them, or forgetting to tell the government that they went for a weekend trip interstate, for example, or they got home a few minutes after curfew. And so the people who have been released as a result of this court judgment are now being subjected to this ongoing monitoring and control regime that is harsher than anyone else in the Australian community is subjected to. And it's being imposed simply because these people are migrants and refugees, and because both sides of politics have decided to politicise this issue. And so people are now going to be living under these really punitive visa conditions, potentially forever. And they're going to have really disastrous impacts on people's ability to rebuild their lives.
And there's so much in the media now, but this person's a sex offender, or this person's done, horrendous crimes. But what about, and Max and I were just saying before, what about citizens are also sex offenders and they don't get subjected to that? Is that a fair enough statement?
Absolutely. That's an absolutely fair enough statement. No one is disputing that some people in this cohort who are affected by the court judgment have been convicted of terribly serious crimes. But other people within that cohort have no convictions whatsoever. And there are people in that cohort that are sort of everywhere in between. But regardless of any of that, these are people who have been singled out for harsher treatment than anyone else, because instead of just respecting the High Court's decision, the government has decided to create a special regime just for this group of people. And I think we really need to reject this suggestion that people affected by this court decision are at any greater risk of reoffending than anyone else would be.
Well,
it doesn't make sense.
Exactly. I mean, how is being an asylum seeker or refugee a recipe for offending? I mean, that can even go on to racial profiling.
I think you're absolutely right, Marissa. I think it's. I think we've seen some really dangerous dog whistling going on in the media over the past few weeks, and very much from particularly the coalition. The way people have been demonised is just, it's really disappointing to see.
And also the character test and the visa. Max and I were discussing last week and today, we were touching on it last week about the visas. What's that called again? The
bridging visas?
Max, what was the number?
The Section 501 has the character test, and it's one of several sort of linked sections in the Migration Act that require people charged with serious offences, and others, but they're the core. When they're charged with a serious offence, they must have their visas must be cancelled, and when that happens, they're an unlawful non-citizen, and they must go into immigration detention.
So can you comment on that, Josephine?
Yeah, I mean, Max is absolutely right, and that is exactly what I was speaking about earlier in terms of our really harsh visa cancellation regime. So we've got this thing called the character test, and it basically gives the Department of Home Affairs the right to cancel people's visas. It could be for criminal offending, but it could also be simply for behaviour that the government decides that it doesn't like. The government has the power to cancel someone's visa based simply on a suspicion of wrongdoing, or on the basis of charges that are later withdrawn, or because a person has associated with another person that the government doesn't like. It's an incredibly wide-ranging test. It's incredibly broad power that the government has to cancel people's visas. So you can see how people end up in these circumstances of being stuck in immigration detention for years through a whole range of different pathways and experiences. And so the people that we're talking about who are affected by this court judgment are a really varied group of people.
Could that not set a precedent? I mean, an injury to one is an injury to all. Set a precedent for activists or people that, protesters, or even people that are citizens, like the anti-terrorist legislation that they had over in the Patriot Act in America. It sounds like the asylum seekers perhaps are being used as guinea pigs for wider legislation.
It's a really slippery slope, Marissa. I think you make a really good point. This concept of subjecting people to monitoring conditions regardless of any actual risk that they pose or any subjective assessment or any oversight of a court. I think this is incredibly dangerous. And to couple that with mandatory minimum sentences for breaches of visa conditions, this is a huge overreach from the government, in my view. It's the first time that the breach of visa conditions has been criminalised. So that's a new line that we have crossed. And I think that these are punitive and unreasonable and unjustified laws. And the government needs to be really careful when it's making laws in this area, because we've seen, not just in the case of NZYQ, but in a couple of other decisions from the High Court recently, the court doesn't take a particularly high or favourable view of the government straying into the sphere of punishment. You know, punishment is it's a role that is reserved exclusively for the courts in Australia, and the government needs to be very wary of imposing laws and conditions that could be punitive.
But that has not been finalised as yet, has it? Just to clarify.
What was
the
that,
decision hasn't been published.
It has been published.
That's right. We don't yet have the reasons for the court. We've got their orders, but we don't have the full reasons of the court. No doubt they will be with us sometime soon, and we'll be able to understand a bit more about precisely where the court has decided that the lawful limits of immigration detention lies.
Because I think the legislation hasn't gone through yet either, has it? About the measures yet to deal with all this.
The bridging visa conditions. So unfortunately, that bill was introduced and passed last week.
Oh, it was passed. Things are happening so quickly.
So quickly. The government has actually introduced another bill today to add some further conditions and some further criminal offences to that regime, and I expect that will be passed very quickly as well.
So if people want to read more about the bills, where can they go?
We do have an explainer on our website at hrlc.org.au. You should be able to navigate through that website, and we've got a little legal explainer of the Bridging Visa Conditions Bill that was passed. Yes, or there's, of course, plenty of commentary floating around in the media.
And the people that are stateless, this is the thing that beggars belief, Josephine.
Yeah. That's right. We're talking about people who simply have nowhere else to go, people who haven't chosen to be in this situation, who probably would have gladly accepted going anywhere if they had any other place to go. But for people who have been denied citizenship by their countries of birth, they've got no other option.
So before you go, Josephine, I just wanted to give you, Max, an opportunity to comment on any of the legal stuff. Are you able to do? You want to do that?
Yeah, there's so many things to say. Can I just on the penalties? You mentioned the minimum of 1 year, the maximum is 5 years for these newly created offences, but there's also a financial penalty of 300 penalty units. These days, a Commonwealth penalty unit is $313. You never get the maximum, but if you did, that's a fine of $93,900. How's a person who's been in immigration detention for years going to pay anything, much less a substantial monetary penalty, as well as doing further time? But I'll just quickly get to a few key points. I wrote an article. You might have seen, Josephine, in the Australian Independent Media Network. I mentioned what you've been covering, that what's the difference? Citizens do their time and they're released. Why aren't non-citizens released? Admittedly, because they're in this visa graveyard sort of situation, the strict conditions somewhat similar, but they sound a lot harsher than the ordinary citizen offences like child offenders, sex offenders being restricted and so on. What the government should have been saying is, look, there's not a great deal to see here. The High Court's made a decision. All it does is bring non-citizens into line with citizens. They do their time, they're released, and if necessary, they're placed on conditions. But could I just add one more thing? The evil spectre in here is the instant cancellation of visa if you're charged. I mean, you could be visa cancelled or less, but let's take the hard cases. You're charged with a serious offence, your visa's cancelled, and if I'm right, Josephine, you're more knowledgeable than I on this. As I understand it, if your visa's cancelled, you're a non-citizen, therefore you're put immediately in immigration detention. You can't. Am I right? You can't apply for bail.
Oh, that's right. If your visa's cancelled and you're detained, there's no bail process, and ordinarily the way the government does these things is that they'll wait until a person has finished their sentence, or if there is a sentence, they'll wait until a person's finished their time in prison, then cancel the visa and take people directly into immigration detention. And there's no bail process.
So there's no bail at the front end, if you like. Therefore, the person can't work. He or she might be supporting a family, and then at the other end, you do your time, you straight away become another non-citizen again, back in immigration detention. As far as I understand, you don't get the chance of parole. You shorten the sentence and start to ease yourself back into the community. You lose that as well. But if what we proposed, Refugee Action Collective, in our submission to this big inquiry into Australian human rights framework, is that instead of the visas being cancelled, wording, this is just a suggestion, but that the visa have inserted at the front of it a provisional pending clarification, whether it's tourist visa, student visa, whatever. You therefore can remain out in the community on bail. If you could be, refuse bail, but you needn't be. And then when you finish your sentence, the question arises as, should your visa be restored, or perhaps another visa? But this 501, the government claims for its monthly statistical bulletin that over 90% of immigration detainees have a criminal record. Well, that's because they cancel the visas and put them in jail and tie them up.
Exactly. It's approximately 4:37 and you're listening to an interview with Josephine Langbien, and also in conversation with Max Costello, veteran activist from the Refugee Action Collective. So what do you think, Josephine, before you go? We've kept you here a long time. I hope you don't mind.
Not at all.
Probably refreshing for you.
No, it's been a pleasure speaking with both of you. Thank you so much.
Do you want to comment a little bit on Max's what Max just said before you go?
I strongly agree with everything that Max has said, and I think we need to go back and remember what immigration detention is supposed to be for. Immigration detention isn't prison. It's not allowed to be punitive. The government has never had the power to use immigration detention as a way to extend people's sentences or to segregate people. That's never been a permissible purpose. And yet we've seen over the past few decades successive governments just slip into this habit of using detention as a way to warehouse people that it doesn't like, to lock people up and throw away the key when the government has no other solution. And that's the High Court has said that this is no longer permissible. And so the government is going to need to radically rethink the way that it uses immigration detention and the way that it manages that visa cancellation regime. And hopefully we can find some path to a better future where people can stay in the community and stay connected with their families and their loved ones in their lives while their visa status is being resolved.
Josephine, thank you so much for coming onto the program. Can you just give the Human Rights Law Centre website and any final comments?
Yeah, of course. It's just HRLC.org.au. And, plenty of information on that website if people are interested. Thanks so much for your time, Marissa, and thanks, Max.
Thanks a lot, Josephine. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. And that was Josephine Langbien from the Human Rights Law Centre, and we did an extended interview and also had some wonderful input as well from Max Costello, who is an activist from the Refugee Action Collective. And I hope you're going to be staying on with us, Max.
Yes, and thanks. I'm so grateful because just wrapping up what both of us have been saying, or building up to it, I think we both agreed, but I'll speak for myself and Rack Vic.
Yeah.
We want to see the end of immigration detention, end it altogether. But and therefore, people, if they come here as seeking asylum or whatever, they need to be, if you like, managed, in inverted commas, within the ordinary criminal justice system. Yeah. Why do we have two parallel systems that are both extraordinarily oppressive but also very expensive and unnecessary?
Very unnecessary, and it really interconnects with the stopping the boats policy, which is another draconian measure, isn't it?
Well, that's right. We've seen people going again to Nauru, and this plays into Mr. Dutton's hands. Labor fell into the trap of defending or explaining this immigration detention of alleged serious offenders. Oh, we don't want these sort of serious offenders in our community, turning a complete blind eye to the fact that there are Australian citizens like this, and they are in our community, and by rights as well. See, they got themselves into the Dutton formula, and then felt themselves trapped in it, and now what they're doing is converting what bits of immigration detention, the indefinite bit that they can't use anymore, what they're really doing is creating almost a system of indefinite home detention. You can't go.
Indeed.
You've got a curfew, you've got an ankle bracelet, you've got monitoring, reporting, etc., etc. You've got to explain your movements, but there's nothing to say how long that can go. Who knows? Exactly.
Now, if people want to get access to your article, Max, how can that happen?
Well, it's the AIM network, and I think the heading was, I've only got a copy of the text here, I think it was Labor missed 4 pro-human rights opportunities offered by the recent High Court decision. It was published, I think, about 10 days ago now, but AIM network. And I must say, I've got a typo. I said that Gagler announced that indefinite immigration detention was. I left out the word detention, but
that's all right.
But the rest is okay.
So let's just take a very short break for a couple of minutes. I'm just going to put on an announcement, and we'll be right back.
Okay, this is a logging operation. Any person found within this coop is offending. Can they please leave? You're allowed no closer than the bridge down the track there. Any person that's found in the coop will be arrested and charged. I direct that you all leave now.
Gecko's turning 30 and we're having a party. The Goongra Environment Centre has been fighting to protect East Gippsland's forest since 1993, and we want to party with you. There'll be music, performances, food, drink, old friends and new friends. What better way to celebrate the end of native forest logging in Victoria? From December 1st to the 3rd in Goongra, East Gippsland. To find out more, go to gecko.org.au.
Gecko, 30 years fighting for forests. Get down to the party. Celebrate with us.
A 3CR supporter.
And in case you've just tuned in, this is the Doin Time Show, 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And joining me in the studio, and he's been here for the whole show, is Max Costello from the Refugee Action Collective. And we're talking quite a lot, aren't we, Max, about the High Court decision, which about indefinite detention.
Yes, and we've covered a bit. There are a few angles that I'd like to raise. I mean, one, there's something I can't recall where I read it, but it was online or in a. I look at Liberty Victoria's list of relevant publication. Might have been one of those, but it announced that the the defendant in the case, the High Court case, who goes by, they never use proper names, NZYQ, he is now, as a child sex offender, he is now receiving counselling to help him deal with that perhaps tendency of his behaviour, and he's getting the sort of treatment that he should have got all along. I mean, the people in immigration detention are under the control of the Home Affairs Department, and a unit within Home Affairs. A lot of people think it's like a separate police force. It's not. Australian Border Force is just a unit within the Department of Home Affairs, and if you look at their website, it says we are responsible for the good order and management of the immigration detention system, including the health and welfare of detainees. Well, tell the detainees that. So what happened to the people who were medevaced here, people like Moz and others?
Oh, Moz is awesome.
But they were brought here under the short-lived Medivac amendments to the Migration Act, and what happened was that the first part of it was complied with, that is, if two treating doctors say they're very seriously ill and they can't be treated properly offshore, they're to be brought here, the wording was, for medical or psychiatric assessment or treatment. But what happened was, instead, they were locked up in hotels, so-called alternative places of detention. Now, some of them might have got some treatment, but by and large, my hunch is, our RAC-VIC's hunch is that Mr Pizzullo and the Immigration Minister at the time might have had a little private chat and said, and I'm not alleging this, I'm just imagining it might have happened, might have said, well, all right, we're stymied, we lost one seat majority, we've got two treating doctors saying they have to come here. Well, yeah, we'll bring them here, but maybe they won't all get the treatment they need. And here's the case where it's but for the High Court decision, this fellow is now getting treatment. He's being treated better than he was all along. It's a sort of a strange anomaly, and that might apply to a few actually.
Absolutely, and in fact, you know, it's such a complex topic, and it shouldn't be complex, really. It shouldn't be.
No, it shouldn't. And here's another non-complexity that merged into a shocking complexity. When an immigration detention facility, whatever it's called, alternative place of detention, immigration transit facility, whatever, it is a Commonwealth workplace. It is therefore subject to the Commonwealth Work Health and Safety Act. And like all the Health and Safety Acts, it says if you run a workplace, you must ensure that the people in it, whether they're workers or other persons, the detainees being other persons, then you, operator, must ensure that they are not exposed to preventable risks to their health, including psychological health and safety. Now, I happened to be a prosecutor for WorkSafe years ago, and one of our members, Margaret Sinclair, has a diploma of work health and safety. Between the two of us, we wrote to Comcare 76 times since 2016, and said, look, here's the evidence, very dangerous to health, blah, 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 with evidence, and asked Comcare to enforce the Act. And every time Comcare wrote back and said, our inspectors have looked at it, we see no breach of health and safety here. So it's not a human rights aspect in a way, but had the Act been enforced, most of the breaches of human rights wouldn't occur. They would have been treated properly, and that wouldn't have breached the Convention Against Torture and Unusual Treatment and so on. But that didn't happen, and that's another angle on the whole situation.
And also in your article, you talk about the decades-long demonisation of refugees and people seeking asylum, falsely implying that almost all of them are uniquely dangerous criminals, must now come to an end. And I think that that's a really pertinent sentence.
Well, you see, in a nutshell, Labor had, as my article said, had opportunities here to end the demonisation, to end the characterisation of detained asylum seekers, refugees, as if they were uniquely dangerous. Whereas when they have to be released, just as non-citizens have to be released, no, they're just like everyone else. That was the opportunity, but did they take it? No. They said, these are dangerous people, but don't worry, we will protect you.
It really is a parallel to what happened when Peter Dutton was talking about how the Africans are dangerous and you shouldn't be going to restaurants when they're around.
Yes, it's so easy to smear and demonise, and it sticks. They're non-persons. They're some sort of strange beasts. They shouldn't be among us. It verges on fascism, that attitude.
Fascism and because of our economic climate, fascism is actually rearing its ugly head.
Indeed, especially in Trump land, but it's emerging here as well.
Trump land is in Australia. It's alive and well.
You're right.
A lot of people are Trumped, aren't they?
The continents are coming together again after all this time.
Can you comment further about the Victorian the Refugee Action Collective's submission?
Oh, it's long and detailed, but we've got an executive summary. One thing that we stress, and it was raised by, I think, Josephine, the statelessness issue. At present, there's a committee called the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights. It used to be originally called the Scrutiny of Bills Committee. It does good work, but of course it's got to get time to look at the proposed bill. Well, it didn't happen this time, but one thing we said about that committee, it only has, I think, 7 or 9 key human rights instruments to check against when they're looking at proposed legislation. 3 that aren't on there are, for heaven's sake, the Refugee Convention and the 2 Statelessness Convention. They have to be on that list.
Absolutely. So it's approximately 4:52. We've got a couple of minutes left. Max, do you want to let's wrap up the show? So, what comments would you like to make in conclusion?
I think this is making a broad political comment. Now, I've mentioned RAC-VIC and the Sydney RAC, a sort of sister organisation, and lots of supportive groups around Australia want to see the end of offshore detention, boat turnbacks, mandatory immigration detention. I'll just mention 2 quick things. The young woman who was the lawyer on the High Court case that first made immigration detention mandatory if you're an asylum seeker, she's written a book, I won't go into detail, but she said that at the time that decision made, 90-something% of people who were waiting for a decision on their visa application were out in the community. And the other thing I should mention is that looking more broadly, you've got all these people with not just this group we're talking about today, but people who are without a visa, without a decision in their fast-track case, thousands and thousands in visa limbo. Labor has to manage this. It's just a management issue, if I could use, the simplest wording. They've got to face up to it and deal with it.
Indeed, and look, there are a few examples too of some people that have been impacted by this decision. I mean, I think there have been a few people in detention that have had court cases, haven't they, prior to this decision, isn't it?
Yes, and I think there's an appeal. There's a fellow who's put an appeal, I think you'd call it. I think it's probably going to the High Court. There are many uncertainties around these visa conditions. There are anomalies, many anomalies, and you might remember a fellow by the name of Neil Parra did this epic walk from Ballarat to Albo's electorate, and it so happened that he and his family, who have been visaless, with no work rights, no rights to study, no rights to Medicare for 10 years, Well, he got, and his family got, I think one of them had some of those benefits, but not the adults. He got permanent residency, I think. Was it citizenship? Anyway, he's all right, Jack, but as he said, I did the walk not for me and my family, but for everyone. He founded the Australian Union of Refugees, and he wants to see everyone in that visa limbo situation attended to.
Absolutely. Max, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I've really enjoyed your company, and I'm hoping that you come back regularly, maybe once every 6 weeks, to do a bit of an update.
Yeah, whatever, Marissa. As the issues arise, RAC-Vic will be responding, and because I'm here as a RAC-Vic spokesperson, I've got to be careful not to ad-lib too much on my own behalf. But
you haven't. Yeah. I mean, your thoughts are really RAC anyway. You know,
pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
But yes, happy to come whenever it suits.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Max. And we're it's nearly the end of the show. We've got about a minute left, and we're out of here. Stay tuned every Monday for the Doin Time show, 4 to 5 p.m. And we're going to be going out now with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella by the Rumpy Band. And it's goodbye from Marissa and goodbye from
Max.
Bye. Be kind to each other. Oops. There we are, third time lucky. Guerrilla Radio.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Black fella, white fella, it doesn't matter what you color, as long as you a true fella, as long as you a real fella.